Hi everyone, it's Tucker here from Delta Drive Designs, here to talk a little bit about engine choices for a M677 resto mod. Got quite a few options, some good, some bad, so stay tuned, subscribe for more, and let's get to it. Alright, so before I get into this, I've got a spreadsheet I'm going to go through kind of my logic on pros and cons of the various motors and which one was ultimately the best. Before I start this, I want everyone put in the comment section your best guess on what motor I'm ultimately going to go with. I'm not going to give any clues up front. You can change your answer as we go through, but I think it'll be fun. So starting with the original motor in the M677 was a Surlist. Surlist, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. C-E-R-L-I-S-T, Surlist. And so that motor, it was by a small diesel company. It was an interesting motor. It was called the loop scavenging diesel. I'm not an expert on it, but as far as I understand, it's kind of like a two-stroke motor. It doesn't have any valve trains or anything. It's all like ports, kind of like a two-stroke, where like the piston would go up and down and open up and closed at various ports. So it was a pretty efficient engine. It was essentially, I think what they say, 1 horsepower per cubic inch or something like that. It was a pretty linear relationship between horsepower and displacement. So like to get the horsepower from a 1-cylinder versus a 4-cylinder, you just multiply it times however many cylinders you had. So it was pretty cool. So that was the original motor in this thing. So it put out a whopping 80, or it was a 2.8 liter, and it put out a whopping 85 horsepower. So it put out a whopping 85 horsepower. 170 foot-pounds of torque, and it weighed around 600 pounds. So this gave it a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.1, and then a torque to weight ratio of 0.3. I'll have a cost column. This one doesn't apply because it's the original motor. It was mated to a T90 3-speed, and then a Dana 18 transfer case. And that's the stock configuration, and so I may just refer to that as stock for the rest of the video. So what's in my M677 right now is a Chevy 250. Someone hacked it in there, I don't know, I assume in like the 70s or 80s. And yeah, so I have a Chevy 250. It runs, kind of. Got it running, but not a great motor in my mind. But let's go through the numbers real quick. So it's a 4.1, very similar to like the 4-liter conversions a lot of people do for gas engines. It's 155 horsepower and 235 foot-pounds of torque. It's a pretty light motor compared to the diesels at 440 pounds, which gives a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.4. And then it gives a torque to weight ratio of 0.5. So pretty good. And it's currently, again, price doesn't matter because it's already in the vehicle. Transmission transfer case it's currently mounted to the stock T90 Dana 18. So that's the Chevy 250 that's currently in the vehicle. Now, one of the favorite conversions, or at least thoughts of a conversion for this vehicle that a lot of people look at, is the Cummins 4BT. And of course, anytime anyone says that, everyone who knows better cringes, because if you look at the numbers, it's a 3.9. Puts out, let's see, 100, and these numbers are rough. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, severely wrong, but they're just kind of a point of reference to compare all the engines. Foot-pounds can put out about 265. And I know there's a lot of variety on the 4BT, like depending if you get the turbocharged one or the non-turbo, like depending on what kind of injection pump. Like, it's not something I'm terribly familiar with, so pardon my incorrectness. But I believe this one is the kind of the higher end. These specs are the higher end of the 4BT without doing any kind of tuning. Weight on this guy is 794, so let's call it 800 pounds. Very heavy motor, which is where a lot of people think it's a good idea, but anyone who knows better knows you're just going to A, have trouble fitting it in the vehicle, and B, you're going to mess up all the suspension. The frame's not really rated for that much weight. So that's kind of a big problem for this motor, as well as sitting next to a very loud and clanky motor when it's literally like 6 inches from you. So that's one problem with those. But this is a favorite desire, a nice to have conversion motor because they're cheap, available, they put out decent power, and they're diesel, which is what this vehicle used to be. Horsepower, so these numbers give a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.1 and then a torque to weight ratio of 0.3. So essentially equivalent to the original Surlist, which that motor couldn't move out of its own way. It got you there, but not fast or fun. So that's the 4BT. And so then it's like, okay, what other diesel motors? And I guess let me back up a minute. Because this vehicle was originally diesel, my goal was to bring it back to diesel. If I'm going to spend the work and the effort into putting a new motor in it, if I'm not going to keep that Chevy 250, then I want to put a diesel in it. I'm not going to do all the work just to put a gas in it. I want to get it closer back to where it was, which, obviously severely limits my choices, hence the table. So you get to the 4BT and you're like, okay, what's next? There's a lot of Mercedes options like the OM 605. I believe that's their 4-cylinder diesel, and it's a 2.5 liter displacement, 148 horsepower. So we're getting close to the Chevy 250, 207 foot-pounds of torque. Again, that's a pretty light motor, 450. So that gives us some decent ratios here. So 0.3 and your horsepower to weight ratio, and then your torque ratio is 0.5. So this one so far, it's actually, is it the same? It's slightly behind the Chevy. And so on this one, the 4BT, I guess on that one, on the transmission, I missed that one. That one I could likely made it to the existing stock. I would just have to get an adapter to go from the engine to the transmission. So I can stick with stock because the horsepower and the torque's not crazy high, although we're getting close to that territory, or we might have to look at replacing it with something a little more stout. The OM 605, same deal. It's similar enough to the Surlist and like the Chevy that we could stick with the stock. So that's the Mercedes 4-cylinder. So that was a good option, but then you start looking. All right, where can I get these? No. So I couldn't even find one that had all the pieces on it. So they're rare. So no point even trying to find a price on it. Like if I can't get parts for them, if I can't get the engine itself, like I need to be able to pull the engine, any kind of computers, which I don't. I think that motor's old enough that it wouldn't have any computers. It's all mechanical, which is a plus. You don't have to worry about the computers. But just finding one that's in good shape, that I don't have to rebuild and spend a bunch of time and energy there. Because that's definitely one part of the equation is how much work do I have to do to get it into the vehicle. And that one being the rarity of it, not a great option. So then we go on to the OM 617. I think that one's a far more likely candidate, and that's their 5-cylinder, and it comes in at 3 liter. See, it's got 123 horsepower, but 184 foot-pounds of torque. So I said it might be a good candidate just a minute ago, but the numbers, compared to the 605, they're not terribly great, but this one's super rare. So this one's kind of out. But then we look at the weight on the OM 617, and it's coming in at 600 pounds. So decently heavy motor compared to its output, which gives us a weight to torque ratio, horsepower to weight ratio of 0.2. And then that gives us a torque to weight ratio of 0.3. So it's less than that M-677, but it's better than like the 4BT. So if it was between those two, the M-617 is really a better option. On that one, if you go on eBay, you can find them, 4 to 5K. Little pricey, but they're at least available compared to the M-605. Now you jump on to the next one, and this one got me really excited. Hold on, before I get to that one. On this one, again, I'd probably keep it mated to the same transmission. Now the next one, when I stumbled on this one, I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's the Cummins 2.8 liter. Cummins 2.8. So that one's got 2.8 liters. So that's the motor that Cummins came out with, I think, in about 2016 or so as a crate motor. It's specifically designed for these kind of applications. Somewhere you got an old power plant, it's tired, you don't want it anymore, and so it's crate, comes everything. ECU comes with turbo and everything. All you have to do is supply like fuel, radiator, and like 12 volts. Pretty basic, and it's super appealing because of its ease. It comes in a crate, you drop it in, you're good to go. So that one puts out some awesome torque and horsepower. So it's coming in 161 horsepower, but over 307 foot-pounds of torque. And even better, it only weighs 500 pounds. 503, call it 500 pounds. I just made that messy. Call it 500 for argument's sake, which gives us a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.3. And then a torque to weight ratio of 0.6. Highest one we've seen yet. Super cool motor. I was super excited. This one was my benchmark. Let me get a different color. This one became my benchmark motor. This is the one I wanted. But you come down here and you're like, all right, how much does it cost? You could get them for 8,000-ish, and then the last 2 years it's been 9,000. But then they went out of stock. Kind of COVID messed up their supply chain, so they went out of stock 2 years ago. They were back in stock briefly last, I think, February, and I missed that boat because I was still just trying to figure out what motor I wanted. And so I missed it, and then I've been bugging them every 2 months, sending them emails when are you going to have this thing in? I need to get this going. I can't keep waiting on this to figure out my motor. And they keep saying supply chain. So right now, their website currently says $10K. So they've not only out of stock, they've increased $1,000. So it's $10K. But you can't get it. Even if you wanted it, you couldn't get it. And so that one, granted, it's my benchmark. It's what I want. But it's too expensive, and you can't get it. And so on that one, also, because of that torque, we're kind of getting outside of the realm of the strength of the T90. Couldn't find a lot of numbers on it. Did a lot of research. I found one reference that says 300 foot-pounds of torque is your limit on that transmission, but nothing official. And then I can mate it up, see how long it lasts, or when it dies, swap it out. I don't know if I want to play that game, so I've been looking at other transmissions to mate to that. And there's the NV 4500, stuff like that. But I think the best one I found, let's see, what was it? Wrote it down here. Oh yeah, the 4L60E. 4L60E. And that one, let's see, that's a Chevy GM product. 4-speed, and it has the main thing I was looking at with transmissions was what that overdrive gear is, because since in my previous videos I said I'm going to stick with the existing driveline or axles, which are 488s. So with a diesel engine, it's cruising RPM is going to be 2,500, On the high end, you'd probably want to get closer to 2,000 RPM. But assume a 2,500 RPM and then like 31s, maybe up to 33-inch tires. Like my max speed at like an overdrive of 0.7 is going to be in the 70s. Not that I want to go that fast in a vehicle where you sit, 2 feet from you are the crumple zone. But, I just want the ability to short spurts to be able to get up to 70 if I need to. This probably not going to take it on the highway very much, if at all, because it's just the nature of these vehicles. But this one, the overdrive gear is 0.7. So that gives me the ability to go close to 70 miles per hour. Whereas, the T90, I could keep it, assuming it survives the torque. With the existing Dana 18 transfer case, well, not the transfer case, sorry, with the T90, the final gear, it doesn't have overdrive, first of all, so I'd have to get the overdrive. And I think Herms sells it. It's like $1,100, and you can upcharge to get you can get like a 0.7. What was it? You can get a 25% reduction, or you can get a 30% reduction. That gets you down to that 0.7. So I could get the T90 down there to the 4L60E, but I'm spending a bunch of money in like an overdrive, and it may not survive. So it's like, okay, I can go with the 4L60E. That's a pretty unsophisticated transmission. I could make it so I can essentially manually shift it, because it's got manual solenoids in there, I believe, or they're electronically actuated solenoids. But a lot of people have like kits out there where you can shift on the fly, and I could hack it into like a manual transmission, so I could shift it like a manual, just kind of for fun. So there's some options on that one, but that's probably if I could get the 2.8, that's what I would mate it with, because it seems like a good option. So then let's go on another one. So when I was kind of in a rabbit hole on that one, I was watching Whistling Diesel Whistling. He's a big YouTube personality. And he was doing the Helix challenge, where he was like destroying that Helix and proving that it's one of the most reliable vehicles in the world. And at the time I didn't know that Toyota had been putting a diesel engine in those Helixes. And so that one is the 1KZ-TE. And that's one of Toyota's like most reliable diesels. It's a 3-liter, I believe 4-cylinder. So again, I guess another point of clarification for this whole discussion is I wanted to stick around that 4-cylinder mark, because that's, you get any bigger than that, like the 5 cylinders would be pushing it to fit in that hole, the doghouse. The Chevy 250 is a 6-cylinder, straight 6, and they had to cut it up to fit. So I wanted to stay away from anything like, I could do like a 6BT or some of these 6-cylinder diesels, but the weight and the size just kind of limited me to like the 4-cylinder, 5-cylinder world. So the Toyota 1KZ-TE is a 3-liter. It puts out 128 horsepower at 212 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty heavy motor though, 617 pounds. That gives us a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.2 and a torque to weight ratio of 0.3. It's like, okay, that's pretty decent. We're a little better than the Surrealist. Not quite as good as the Chevy, but the Chevy's old. I don't want to mess with that one. So it does look good numbers wise, but it's out. But it's better than the 4BT, and it's the same as the M-677. So it's like, this seems to be, this is probably the better one over the OM because it's a smaller engine, 4-cylinder. Cost-wise, you can't really find them here because for whatever reason, we don't have Helixes here. We don't have Toyota diesels here because, America has this weird aversion to diesels, even though they're super efficient and you can make them clean if you have to, with all that emissions crap. So there's no reason for us not to have diesels. Denver conversation, different video. There's some politics, I assume, behind that. But nevertheless, you can't get them. They're not like in junkyards out here. So you got to get a crate motor. There's a process. I've drawn a blank for that. But essentially, like Japan and stuff, they hit 100,000 mile or kilometers and they have to swap it out. So you can get this essentially just broken in crate motor shipped over here, and they're running around 5K, which isn't bad, all things considered. But the worry of that is, you don't have those motors here. So parts, getting them here is difficult. You run, fuel pump dies on you. Can you get them here? So there's definitely some considerations on that one for parts availability. Transmission wise, we're still in the stock territory on that one. So we could keep the stock if we wanted to. So then, I'm not going to write these ones down, but, I was like, okay, what else? Like, what other small diesels out there? And, there's Perkins, there's Yanmar, there's Kabuto. I looked at those, and, there's a bunch of different varieties, but those are mostly like farm, like water pump, like a kind of industrial application engines. So, they're in like the sub 100 horsepower, the low, like less than 200 foot-pounds of torque. And while, they're probably modern equivalents to the Surlist, like I don't really want to mess with sticking like a farm implement tractor motor in the Jeep. People do it, but I don't know. So I kind of abandoned those. So I'm not even going to put them up here. Yeah, because I have one Yanmar. It was 83 horsepower. So we're not going to talk about that one. So next one on this list would be probably one of the more famous diesel motors in modern history. Sorry, infamous motor would be the VW diesel TDIs. And everyone remembers the whole emissions scandal with those, which could be one of the driving factors why we don't have diesels, a large variety of diesels in America anymore, is because of VW. I don't know that, speculation. But so in that one, so the VW TDI, that one, so that's a pretty small motor. Comes in at 1.9. But I believe there is one guy on the Facebook FC group who is doing this motor, and I think it's working out for him. He hasn't said any yays or nays on it, but so there's one guy definitely doing that in an FC, so it does work. It's a little low on the horsepower. It's kind of in that realm. It's 90 if you can't see that. I write my nines a little weird. Let's try it again. 90 horsepower. So again, it's in that territory of the Yanmars and the Kabutos and Perkins, but it does put out some respectable 155 foot-pounds of torque, which, if you consider its displacement, are actually pretty darn good. Because it's a light motor, let's see, 360 pounds. So by far the lightest. Again, it's in that same territory as the Kabutos and the Perkins and the Yanmars. But so those numbers give us a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.3 and a torque to weight ratio of 0.4. So it's up there as one of the best as far as these two parameters motor. So the guy who's doing it on Facebook, I bet you he's probably pretty happy with this motor. It's in a FC 150 or 170 though, so a little lighter of a vehicle. But numbers wise, it's better than the Surlist, better than the 4BT. Yeah, it's up there. Cost wise, let's see, you can find them. That's a pretty common motor. So you can 2 to 3K gets you the motor, any computer and stuff like that. You're probably better off doing like a front clip cut on that one, so you can get all the important stuff. And definitely with this one, you could stick with the stock transmission. So that one's definitely an option. But let's keep going. I think I've got 3 more. So I was like, okay, what else? What else is there? There's one that a lot of off-roaders do. It's the Isuzu 4BT1T. Is that right? 4B. I think I have an extra T in there. Isuzu 4B. I think it's 1T. I think I messed it up. 1T. Again, I believe that's their 4-cylinder, 3.9 liter. So pretty big displacement compared to the others, except for like the 4BT and the Chevy. So that one, let's see here. That one puts out 135 horsepower So pretty low compared to its displacement, and 243 foot-pounds of torque. Weight-wise, pretty darn heavy motor, 770 pounds. So it's big displacement, low horsepower, low torque, big weight. Not a lot of pluses in its column. So those numbers give us a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.2, horsepower to weight, and then torque to weight of 0.3. So it's in that same realm as the Toyota. But, look at that weight. It's 150 pounds more than the Toyota. But cost-wise, they're a little more available, 2 to 3K. So on that one, I don't know. It could be an option. Transmission-wise, torque and horsepower are fairly close. I mean, we're under that 300 foot-pounds of torque. Close to the Surrealist, definitely in line with the Chevy. So you can stay with the stock. Alrighty. So then, second to last, it's like, all right, what else? Well, so my wife has a Grand Cherokee EcoDiesel, and I love that diesel. I mean, it's got lots of power, lots of torque, super efficient. It's like, okay, I have it sitting in the driveway. I can take measurements. I can think about it, but it kind of falls out of my realm or my criteria of being a 4-cylinder. It's a V6. So we got 3.0 liter Eco, hopefully you can read that, EcoDiesel. That's made by VM Motori that like right next to like Lamborghini factory stuff in Italy. They're a big partner with the Jeep products for a lot of their diesel motors, and I think they've made all of their recent diesels. They made the one that they put in like the Liberty in the early 2000s, and then they made this one, which has been a really good motor. It's in the Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's also in the Ram 1500, I believe. And again, I've really liked it. Like I know that one's a 3-liter. It makes 240 horsepower and 420 foot-pounds of torque. Like, awesome. I think that one might be one of our highest. Let's go and look at the numbers. Weight-wise, we are at 500. So pretty light motor, 500 pounds. So that gives us a horsepower to weight ratio of 0.5 and a torque to weight ratio of 0.8. It's like, well, that is by far the best motor. Like, besides being a V6, that's the only downside. V6, I don't think I could fit in there without hacking up a bunch. But it's super appealing because, again, I have one right here. I can mock it up. But that one, so cost-wise, I'd be looking at like a front clip. Because there's so much computers and stuff with it. I want to get, like, I started looking at like Copart. Like, can I buy like a Ram 1500 on Copart and just take the whole vehicle? So those are running, 7 to 9K. And transmission-wise, no way I can run the stock transmission. I'd have to do something else, either the 4L60 or probably just, the 8-speed that comes with it. 8-speed. I don't know what it's called. But if I'm going to pull like a modern engine, I might as well pull the modern transmission with it. So that way I'm not trying to do a bunch of programming to get the computer to figure out that it's a different transmission. Don't really want to do that. But so if I could find one at Copart, it's more than I wanted to spend, but still less than the Cummins. And the other thing with the Cummins though, so I've got 10K just for the motor. And I still got to buy the transmission. Those probably call it $1,000 for a good condition one. So then I'm into it, and then I got to get all like the radiators and all the accessories to fit that. And then transfer case. I'd have to find a transfer case that mates to that. So I'm estimating I'd be into this motor, 15 to 20K before I even got a drive line ready to go in that vehicle. So then that brings us to the last motor I looked at. And this one kind of caught me off guard. It was actually interesting. I was looking up the Cummins 2.8 liter. I've just looked up 2.8 liter diesel. because I just assumed that was the only one out there. And I'd be watching videos like, oh, this is cool. It's in a truck, like it's super available. Look at the torque and horsepower ratings. This is awesome. And then after a few videos, like I realized, oh, that's the Duramax 2.8, not the Cummins 2.8. And so that is the last motor on here. So that is 2.8 liters. Horsepower, that one is 181 at 369 foot-pounds of torque. Interesting thing on this motor, the Duramax. So it's actually a European motor. They've had it around forever. And since like probably early 2000s, I want to say. And to bring it here, they brought it here in like 2012-ish. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, in the last like 10 years, they brought it to America. And to do so, they had to meet the emission standards. And so essentially to meet that, they derated the motor. Because in Europe, or wherever else this overseas where this motor is prevalent, it's pushing 400 foot-pounds of torque. So they just derated it. So that means if I got this motor, I could re-rate it, I could tune it, and get some crazy torque. Not that I'd want to, but this is plenty. But let's look at the weight on this guy. So it's pushing 520 weight. So that gives us weight to horsepower of 0.3. Sorry, horsepower to weight, and then torque of 0.7. And then they are prevalent out there. There weren't a lot on eBay when I looked. I was putting together this table, but you could get them for 4 to 5K. They're more available than the EcoDiesel because I think it's a smaller motor, less desirable. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe it's probably because they've been around a little longer, so they're more prevalent. They're showing up. They've only been here since 2012, so they got to show up in junkyards and stuff for them to be prevalent. Whereas the EcoDiesel, I want to say, I guess it's been about the same. 2013, 2014. So never mind. Disregard that. Transmission on that, again, if I'm gonna pull like a modern motor, I'm gonna try to keep the modern transmission with it. And this one in the Duramax, like in the Colorado and the Canyon, it comes with the 6L50 transmission. And interesting thing on that one, so that's like a Camaro transmission. Why they decided to take a small truck and mate a car transmission to it is a very good question. Especially because it limits out, like per its specs, this is more torque than it's rated for. So how they're able to sell this to a truck audience when it's currently, it's rated less than the torque that the motor puts out. So I'm amazed there's not a bunch of transmission issues on these Colorado or Canyon. Yeah, I guess it's both Colorado and Canyons that have these motors or these diesels in it. Nevertheless, they seem to be doing okay. It's a 6-speed. Final drive on the overdrive is 0.67. So it means we're beating the stock configuration with an overdrive. So it means with like 31s, 32s, I could be pushing, I think I calculated 72 miles per hour. So we're in that realm. All right, before I give away the ending to my table, take a look at the motor and see if you can guess which one I picked. Put your comments down below. So if you haven't figured it out yet, it's probably pretty obvious which motor I went with. So we got, just looking at the numbers, the best two are gonna be, let's get it. EcoDiesel's number 1. Duramax is number 2. Cummins is number 3. This 4-cylinder Mercedes is number 4. And then we're starting to get into ties. Again, Chevy, that one does look pretty good by the numbers, but it's out, so don't even consider it. So I think 4 is good. Yeah, we're starting to get into ties. All right, drum roll everyone. Duramax 2.8. after I got my last email from these guys saying like they still don't know when they're gonna get it, I just went out on a whim, found a screaming deal on this guy. These guys out at Riverside Auto and Truck. I got a bunch of boxes in here. They hooked me up, awesome deal, the full truck. Like I'll put some videos in here of getting the crate in here and unboxing it. Literally, it was a truck in a box without the truck. I mean, we had engines, we got radiators, we got gas tanks, we got everything. And actually, I think at this point, let's go ahead and take a tour. It's 2.8. And if you pull all the plastics and other stuff off, it looks pretty much just like the Ford GT. Common rail, injection system. You got lots of electronics, which is a little worrisome, but modern vehicle, lots of electronics. Let's see what else. Yep. So it's measurement wise. Take a measurement from engine mount to engine mount. It's, I want to say, I can't remember, I took it last week. I think 28 inches is what I measured. Which frame rails on the M-677 is 32 inches. So minus 2, those should just barely fit inside. Inside on those frame rails should be around 28. So I may have to modify them slightly to get them past the rails, but it should fit inside the frame. Then height wise, it's pretty tall motor, unfortunately. Tripped over here. So it's got a whole bunch of extra oil pan down here. So I don't know. I think it's small enough where I can fit it behind the front axle and it'll be okay. Because from there to top of motor, where'd my tape measure go? Misplaced my tape measure. Well, I want to say, I think it's in the 30s, the low 30 inches. But from the front oil pan to the top, we're much better in like the mid 20s. So again, I think if I can stick it low enough in the frame, I can minimize how far up in the doghouse it goes, because it does get, like all modern motors, which is the problem with these conversions, is those doghouses were designed for really narrow engines. Like it's like I think 22 inches is as much as you have in there, where it opens up inside the cab. Down below the cab, it's got 30 inches or so, 28 inches, between the frame rails and the sheet metal underneath the top of the cab where you sit. But yeah, from this one, so where's my tape measure? Oh, that's my tape measure. Oh well. So we got from center line of the motor to the outside of the alternator. I mean, that's kind of our extreme on this engine. It's like 11-12 inches. So 22 inches, like that's just barely there. Like I think I can make it fit. Intake, that one's a little bit outside of our window, so it'll be a little bit of a trick. But there's people who do like a blade delete, so I could delete this and kind of rework this piping, or it's all plastic. And I've got a bunch of 3D printers. I could redesign this manifold to bring it up on top of the motor. Just kind of a nice gentle swoop, and then reorient this. And that's ultimately what I think I'm going to do for intake, coolant, is get them on top of the motor and run them down in front to get to the radiators. Because this is actually the output from the what do you call it? That thing. What's this called? I don't know. You guys know what it is. Intercooler. There it is. It's the intercooler. So that's the output of the intercooler, and then the input of the intercooler is, let's see, is this guy. And then we got the actual air intake. So I'm thinking I'm going to route, make some aluminum tubings to come up and drop down in front of the motor. Get rid of the fan. Go to electric fan on the radiator. Find like a tall, narrow radiator, which there are some out there, do electric fan. That gives me the ability to put ductwork down between the radiator and the engine to get to the intercooler, the actual radiator. The other option though is I put the radiator in the back of the vehicle. Not a lot of room for a radiator that big, so I'm kind of thinking what I just described. So, but back to everything I got in the crate. So I got, you know, full engine, transmission, transfer case, driver side transfer case, unfortunately, which is, as I alluded to in previous videos, unfortunate for my front axle because we currently have a passenger side drive shaft for the front axle. So I have to figure that out. I got all the emissions goodies, drive shaft, which I can't use that, unfortunately, because this is a pretty long drive line. I'm going to end up with probably a 24-inch drive shaft, which I think I can make work. Then we got all the goodies. I mean, literally all the wiring harnesses, anything electronic. They stuck in a box and sent my way. Got air boxes, got all the tubing, got fuel tanks, got the def tank, got this guy, got the front console, shifter, I got heated seat buttons, which I probably won't use. I'm gonna move my notes over here. And then we got, you know, the entire dash came with the steering column, came with the speedo, which is super exciting. I took this apart briefly. I can possibly extract the different components and put them into the various holes on the dash. Be a little risky, so I don't know, I may keep that, or I may reach out to, what's the company out in Utah? It's a dash company, or a gauge company. They make modern OBD2 gauges that adapt to all old vehicles and everything. So I might reach out to them for like a custom gauge that fits the old hole. Haven't figured that one out quite yet. Yeah, I got everything. Got, you know, brake pedal. I got the accelerator pedal in here. Got everything. So it's super exciting, and all for much less than I would be in on that Cummins. So I overall, you know, hate it or like it, I think this is a really good option for a conversion. No one's done it before as far as I know, so it's a little unorthodox, but I think it'll be super cool and move that Jeep along pretty darn well. So other than that, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and see you guys next time.